Today I'm going to tell you why one of the most popular states to move to isn't for everyone. That's right, today we're looking at 15 reasons Washington residents say not to move to the Evergreen State. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. Number 15, the Rain and Gloom. Washington is known for its rain. The strange thing is, like Oregon, it's really just on the western side of the state. The eastern side of both states gets about half the rain that the western side gets. The reason that you hear about it all the time is because that's where a majority of the population is in both states. So this entry on this list is kind of focused on Western Washington. In Western Washington, they don't measure rain in inches or centimeters. They measure it in the milligrams of antidepressants you're on. It's the kind of place where the word sun has become local folklore. Their weather forecasters are also part-time therapists, consoling them as they mourn another sunless weekend. The good news is everyone's garden's nice and lush and green and all that good stuff. What I'm trying to say is the western side of Washington is wetter than a mermaid's armpit. And that's a big reason a lot of people won't move to Washington. Western Washington sees an average of 150 rainy days per year compared to the national average of about 106. Seattle, in particular, experiences an average of 38 inches of rain annually. The dreary weather can lead to seasonal affective disorder, or SAD as they call it. Up to 9% of Seattle's population suffers with this. I'm one of the people, I'm happy all the time. It doesn't bother me. I like rain, I like gray skies. Doesn't bother me at all, but some people, it really affects their mood. That's why you get so many people moving to like Oregon and Washington and they can't take it more than a year. They're gone. Number 14, the high cost of living. Washington has a pretty high cost of living, and a lot of that, again, has to do with the western side of the state. Seattle is one of the most expensive cities to live in the country. At the end of 2023, the median home price in Seattle was around $840,000, significantly higher than the national average of $416,000. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment averages about $2,200 a month. I just kind of glanced at a couple websites, and the median home price right now in 2024, mid-year, is about $865,000. So it's gone up around $25,000 in 6 months. Rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Seattle is all over the place, but if you find anything below $2,000, you're stepping over homeless people to get into your apartment. Now, Washington overall is more expensive than most states, outside of like California, Massachusetts, and New York. Seattle really brings down their averages. This is the home of high-tech giants and tiny apartments. This city has perfected the art of micro-living. A studio apartment here costs about as much as a castle in some parts of the country, and a cup of coffee requires a small loan. It gets a little cheaper as you go east and as you go south down the coast, but they still got a lot of really nice small mountain towns that are terribly expensive. Number 13, the traffic nightmare. Obviously, the cities is where a majority of the traffic's going to be. Seattle's going to be the worst. Tacoma's pretty bad. Olympia's bad. I live not too far from Vancouver, Washington, and that has its times where it gets a little congested. And of course, Spokane has their own problems with traffic. But nothing compares to Seattle. It's the 7th most congested city in the US, with drivers losing an average of 94 hours per year in traffic delays. The average commute time in the Seattle area is 30 minutes, 6 minutes longer than the national average. Everyone thought there'd be this big change after the pandemic as more and more companies let people work from home. Fewer cars on the road, especially at rush hour. It barely changed. Number 12, the Seattle freeze. Just recently I had a guy leave a comment on one of my videos about how the Seattle freeze isn't real and he's disappointed in me. That's my favorite. I'm disappointed in you, Briggs. Well, I don't care. You're not my mom. That's something you say to your child. I'm really disappointed in you. You don't say that to a grown man you've never met in person. I get a pretty good chuckle every time I read that. It's like, this guy's trying to impersonate my grandmother. But the Seattle freeze is real. Ask anyone that's moved to Seattle from someplace else. If you don't know what it is, they have this thing thing where if you're not from there and they don't already know you, people in Seattle don't want new friends. In 2014, a study found that Washington residents were among the least likely to talk to their neighbors or socialize with people from different backgrounds. This social reserve can make it difficult for newcomers to establish connections. Many years ago, I noticed this. I'm talking like the early 90s. I didn't know there was a name for it. There's a lot of different reasons and a lot of explanations for it. A lot of it has to do with cultures and being a port town. A lot of different cultures moved into the Seattle area in the early days, so they almost had this tribal mentality. I read one thing where a guy said a lot of the Scandinavians, that's how they are. They just, unless you're in their family or their little group, they don't have any time for you. And a lot of Scandinavians were in Seattle in the early days, and it just became part of Seattle's culture. Number 11, they got a lot of weird people. Yes, Washington has some pretty strange people, and they're not all in Seattle. But if you do want to see the highest density of weird people, go to Seattle. But there are definitely some strange people living in Washington. You have a lot of those preppers that think the end of the world is coming. You've got a whole bunch of Bigfoot hunters that roam through the woods up there in Washington. I did a video about 3 years ago on Bigfoot, and there's like these whole communities of people that plan trips to go hunt Bigfoot out in the woods around Washington. And of course, you've got all the people that are into different arts and things like that that tend to be a little bit on the strange side. So if you're coming from the middle of Iowa and you move to Washington, you might find some people that aren't cut from the same cookie cutter as you. Just keep that in mind. Well, this has bothered a lot of people that have moved to different parts of Washington. I know one person in particular moved to the Moses Lake area, which is in the eastern section of Washington, and he left because the people were just freaking weird, he said. That's just one person's experience, but I've read a lot of different things about different areas of Washington having some pretty strange people living there. Number 10, high taxes. Now this one's a little misguided, I believe. People complain about the taxes in Washington all the time, but it's also a state that has no state income tax. So right away you think, oh, well, the taxes are low in Washington. Not really. They have some pretty high taxes other places, so much so that there's all kinds of jokes that people make about it. Like in Washington State, you can experience all 4 seasons in a single day: sunny, rainy, cloudy, and tax season. It's the Evergreen State, where money doesn't grow on trees. It gets harvested by the Department of Revenue. Washington State has the highest sales tax in the nation. In early 2024, it was 5.46%. When you start looking at the local sales tax, combined with the state sales tax, it does get pretty high. They're actually 4th in the nation on average, with 6.5% sales tax. Washington residents pay an average of $6,962 in state and local taxes per year. So even though they don't have a state income tax, it's a bit of an illusion, because the state and local governments get pretty deep into your pockets. Number 9, natural disasters. Every state has their fair share of natural disasters. Washington's no exception. I mean, everyone talks about the cloudiness and the rain. They got some other things going on there that keep people away, and people say that's why they won't move to Washington State, like wildfire season. It's getting worse every single year. Washington will also have a couple earthquakes every single year. Not terribly bad. We're not talking California earthquakes that rattle your back teeth, but they do get them. The state is also home to 5 active volcanoes. Everyone remember Mount St. Helens from the 1980s? Yes, that's a possibility again. These things may not bother you, but they do scare a lot of people. If you ever meet someone that's afraid of volcanoes or they talk about volcanoes, don't bring up Yellowstone to those people. Oh my God. They start twitching and can't stop talking about it. They'll tell you that's what's going to kill us all. Number 8, tech industry dominance. Yes, the tech industry plays a big part of Washington. For the most part in Seattle, but it does stretch out to other communities throughout the state. And if you're not in the tech industry, it's a little hard to find a job sometimes in Washington State. The tech sector accounts for over 20% of Washington's GDP. This has driven economic growth, but has also led to income inequality and a lack of diversity in job opportunities. That might not seem like a lot to some of you, that 20% is one sector, but trust me, it is. If you have a degree in some kind of technology, there's a few places you move to and you know you'll have a job waiting for you. Different cities in California, like Los Angeles, Santa Monica especially, San Francisco, the Portland metro area, and of course Seattle. In the last couple of years, the southern part of Washington has seen a little jump in the tech industry. It's like this whole circle of life thing. Tech jobs bring better jobs, which means landlords have people looking for apartments and houses that can pay more because they have better jobs, which means the people that don't have tech jobs or are in some other high-paying industry, they get squeezed out, and some of them end up on the street, creating more of a problem for the city and the state. Number 7, the homeless crisis. Yes, so obviously Seattle is the main driver for the homeless population in Washington state. Vancouver's no slouch, Tacoma has a lot, Spokane has a good size homeless population. But obviously a majority of the homeless people you're going to find in the major cities, so we're just going to talk about the Seattle metro area on this one also. Seattle, the unofficial capital of flannel and $5 lattes, has also become a haven for the creatively homeless. Where else can you find a tent city with its own microbrewery and an open mic poetry night? Yes, it's a thing. Remember what I said about strange people living in Washington? I was in Seattle one time and I saw a bearded man who was homeless juggling flaming torches while balancing on a unicycle, all the while soliciting spare change because he wants the new iPhone. In Washington, homelessness isn't just a crisis. It's a lifestyle choice complete with organic dumpster diving and a thriving barter economy based on beard combs and vegan jerky. Washington state has the 3rd highest rate of homelessness in the U.S. It's estimated that 22,000 individuals experience homelessness in Washington state, with about 12,000 of them being in Seattle alone. Number 6, the devil's lettuce. Now, this video is about reasons you might not want to move there. Now, most people don't have a problem with the legalization of the devil's lettuce, but some people do have a problem with it, and it bothers them so much they won't want to move to a state that has that. Hastings Research reported that 29% of the U.S. population have second thoughts about moving to a state that has legalized the devil's lettuce. Yes, and I'm saying it that way for a reason because I don't want to get demonetized. I always get some advocate and they try and like guilt me. If you had any balls, Briggs, you just say it. I do have balls. I just like money too. You can live in that hippie world you live in with hacky sacks, the devil's lettuce, and no money. I don't want to live there. But of the 29%, over half of them said they wouldn't raise their children in a state that has legalized that. Now, there's also a gray market for it. Even though it's legalized, there's still a market for the old dealers, I guess. About 30% of the sales in Washington still occur on the illicit market. I guess for some people, legalizing it just kind of took the fun out of getting it. Number 5, the ferries. Now, a lot of people don't like ferries, and they don't like putting their car on there, they don't like going across the water. It is time consuming, and you just wish they have a giant bridge that gets you everywhere that has water. You got the Puget Sound right there in Elliott Bay, and it is hard to build a bridge to some of those islands that are out there. So if you need to go to someplace like Bremerton or Port Orchard or Bainbridge Island, you're going to have over an hour drive or you're going to have to get on a ferry. With traffic, it can turn into a 2-hour drive easily. The funny thing about this, Bainbridge Island, let's say you're going there, that's about an hour ferry trip once you get on and get over there and get off and all that stuff, where if you drive there, it's going to be about the same amount of time. But a lot of people hate having to deal with ferries and bridges, and if that's something you don't like, you're not going to want to move to Washington, especially the Seattle metro area. Number 4, overcrowded outdoors. The population boom in Washington state has gifted the locals with housing shortages and epic traffic jams. But wait, there's more. They've also brought a flood of people to their beloved trails and campgrounds, like Mount Rainier. Now, finding a campsite or a trail that isn't swarming with folks is like finding a unicorn in a haystack. Washington's national parks and recreation areas saw over 44 million visitors in 2023. Popular trails like Mount Si and Rattlesnake Ledge are often overcrowded, especially on the weekends, as you can imagine. Number 3, long dark winters. Washington experiences an average of 8.5 hours of daylight in December, compared to 15 hours in June. That can play a toll on people, just like the cloudy and rainy skies do. It affects people's moods, their energy level. Now, I live in the Portland metro area and I grew up in Southern California, and I could tell a difference. The first year I moved up here, it seems to be getting dark a lot earlier here. It was a little strange. I lived on Fort Lewis, which is in Washington, and I think it was a long time ago. I think I remember it being a little shorter than 2, or at least noticing it. Obviously it was. This one was a bigger complaint than I thought it would be. I mean, it's noticeable, but to me it's not that big of a deal. I guess it is to a lot of people though. Number 2, diversity. While Seattle is relatively diverse, the state as a whole is less so. White residents make up about 67% of the population, while Hispanic and Latino residents make up about 13.7%, and Black residents make up about 4.3%. This, again, is obviously a pretty big deal to a lot of people. I mean, if you're one of the races that isn't representative by a large population in a state or a city, you might feel less welcome. If you're like me that loves a big Hispanic community because I know there's going to be great tacos and food, then yeah, that could affect someone like me too. Is Washington the whitest state in the nation? Absolutely not. That's West Virginia. All right, before we get to number 1, if you're thinking about moving to Washington or any state, there's a link for a website called Home and Money in the description area below. They can get you in touch with a real estate agent anywhere in the country. All right, on to number 1. And number 1. Wacky Politics. Washington is consistently ranked as one of the most liberal states in the US. The state has progressive policies on issues like LGBTQ rights and environmental protection, which can be a source of contention for some. Politics more and more these days play a big part of where people want to move to, how people feel about states or whatever. Like I've said before, I don't care how you vote, I don't care what you do, I'll move wherever the hell I want. But it does play a part in a lot of people's decision making. Now, I'm not saying either way how anyone should feel about anything. I'm just telling you that this is a reason a lot of people have problems with moving to Washington, Portland, California. And on the other side, a lot of people won't move to Florida. These days, a lot of people are leaving Florida. Every state's got their own issue and different people feel different ways about each one. And over the last handful of years, as political friction has built in this country, this one becomes more and more of a thing. I know a ton of people that are leaving California for politics. I know a bunch of people that won't move to Oregon because of their politics. I know 3 people right now, 2 of them are teachers, that have left Florida because of their politics. Every state's got their thing that somebody else doesn't like. No one's immune. But for the people that don't like left-leaning politics, Washington is not a state for you. If that is the case, you probably already know Idaho's probably a better option for you. If not, Wyoming or Montana. Or actually Alaska. Everything's getting cheap up there because people are flooding out of Alaska right now. That's for another video though. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. Now go out, have a great day, be nice to each other.